Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our last virtual career series of the spring 2020 semester. My name is Yalitza Negron Rivera. I'm the Director of Career Services of Rockefeller College of Public Affairs and Policy. I'm also joined with my colleague, Joan Marceau, who's the Undergraduate Internship and Career Coordinator, and who'll be assisting with some of the logistics and behind the scenes to make sure that we are getting you all the most information possible and making this last session a great session for us to end in our virtual career series for this semester. You are joining us to learn more about how to boost your LinkedIn profile. So we have some really great content prepared for you today. Just some quick note, this session is being recorded and the chat box is being transcribed. So all of this information will be shared with you as a follow-up email early next week. Additionally, later on in our chat box, I will be putting in the link to our evaluation of today's session. So we'd appreciate if you take a few minutes. It's very quick. It'll probably take you not even less than 5 minutes just to let us know what you thought about today's session. We are planning on doing a summer virtual career series as well to continue our momentum because we saw how popular these sessions were. So we encourage students to make sure that if you haven't, if you could do that, that'd be great because we're really taking our topics and selecting them based off of student feedback. So again, you are welcome to keep your cameras turned off. You are welcome to also utilize the chat box to post any questions along the way. Joan is going to help me to make sure that I am in keeping track of time, but also wherever she can insert a question to help make sure we're gearing this as much to your learning, that would be great. So excited to work with all of you on here. So I'm going to take a second and share my screen so that we can start our session for today. And Joan, feel free to write to me on the chat box if anything. Okay. All right, everyone. Let me get our slideshow ready. Okay. All right. So welcome to How to Boost Your LinkedIn Profile. I know for some folks, this is one of those popular sessions because for many people, you really want to learn how to utilize this tool. You may have heard about it and people are probably pushing it a lot right now. So it's just an exciting time to honestly utilize this and spend time with it because we recognize there's a lot of uncertainty. And I just want to be honest, I know there's a lot of questions about the future and the state of the economy, the state of what the market's going to look like for jobs and internships. And if you've been with us throughout this whole virtual career series, there's, you know, we've continued to leverage the important message of networking, networking, networking. And one tool to accomplish this is truly LinkedIn. What we commonly see is, though, some folks will create a LinkedIn profile, but it's not filled out to the best that it can be. So we want to help give you some tangible structure on what is the most important things you need to do on how to create a really good profile, but also to leverage a few key areas on there as well. So what are your most pressing questions regarding your LinkedIn profile? And here's what some of you said when you registered for this training for today. First, a lot of you came into consensus wanting to know, how do you actually fill out the profile? What exactly is that headline section? What do I do with the summary? How do I fill out that work section? You know, what is that skill section? Everybody really wants to know, what exactly am I supposed to be doing with this? Is it just me repeating my resume? And not necessarily always true. So we want to make sure that we're helping you to understand how this platform can be used for your networking. Also, what are some key words to put on your profile to attract employers? I thought that was such an excellent and informed thought. You know, what am I doing to make sure that the right contacts are coming to my profile and are considering me for some opportunities? How to fill out the about section, like I mentioned already. How to best network with employers is also another popular question that was brought up when people were noting why they were interested in this session. Absolutely, there's so many ways to connect with employers and other contacts, so we'll give you some information on that. And one great question was, does the certifications from LinkedIn really matter? And you know, it's really interesting. LinkedIn actually started as a platform shortly, I feel like thereafter LinkedIn. I remember it when I was in college, but it wasn't very popular. But at the time, they were just saying, just put your resume, emulate your resume on this platform, and you're going to be good to go. But to be honest with you, this platform, it needs to be so much more engaged, and it has grown tremendously. So I want to help you to understand what exactly, when we say LinkedIn, are we really talking about here, and to help you understand what a comprehensive website this has really become from when it first was launched. So first and foremost, LinkedIn breakdown. Yes, you are all very familiar with the individual profile. That is your profile, so we're going to spend some time really helping you to understand what you need to do there. And I'm also going to include some visual examples as well where I can. Professional profile of others. So these are other people, individuals that may have similar career interests than you, or they might be working in various industries, but these are other people that potentially you might look to connect with. LinkedIn is also composed of employer and company profiles as well. So think about it also to add to that layer of searching, right? Not only could you follow other people, but you can also follow companies and organizations. And a lot of organizations, specifically in the public sector, are leveraging LinkedIn as a way to canvas candidates, but they're also using it as a way to promote to candidates. And what you'll find is sometimes they will link their position descriptions back to their website or to a search engine where their position's posted, or sometimes for some of them, like federal agencies that utilize Twitter a lot, they will link to Twitter. So there's a lot of really neat ways that employers are helping folks to learn about their company, their culture, and what available opportunities there are for either internships or employment opportunities. LinkedIn groups. If you haven't discovered this, this is such a great tool for all of you to consider as well. LinkedIn, groups really allows you to also find and network with people that may have similar interests than you. Now, there are slight differences from them, though. These are professional groups. They're not really much around hobbies or interests the way Facebook groups are. Although I agree, Joan and I talked about this in our networking session. Those are really great groups to start practicing your networking skills in an area that you might be more comfortable. But LinkedIn groups tend to be a little bit more focused on the professional side of growth and development within a field. LinkedIn Learning. So I'm going to be honest, I just learned about this a couple weeks ago. And so now I'm I'm a lifelong learner. If a lot of people don't know that about me. So LinkedIn Learning is a really great aspect to the company's web platform that really allows you to build up and learn on various different skill sets. Now, I will be honest, there's so many different comprehensive elements of LinkedIn, and there are paid versions that allow you more access to certain features. Right now, I'm just focusing on the real basic things that you can leverage, but just keeping in mind how much is available to you on this platform. And I certainly don't want anyone to walk out of this training overwhelmed, thinking I have to do all of these things. Right now, I want you to think about what is realistic for you to implement, whether you start checking off some of this over the weekend, or you begin this right after the end of the semester. But we're going to really focus now and transition onto the real basics of what constitutes a really good profile on LinkedIn. So I'm going to hold for 1 second. Joan, did anybody ask anything that I should comment on, or it seems like the chat box is okay?
No questions at this point.
Okay, wonderful. So just a quick reminder, there are opportunities for you to ask questions. So we want to make sure we leave room for that. So just make sure to utilize that chat box, and where we can get a natural break, happy to answer those. All right, so profile basics. This may seem a little elementary, but I promise you when I show you these examples, you'll understand why this is one of the top tips given on any training regarding LinkedIn. You want to make sure that you're picking the right profile and the right background picture. Think about your introduction, right? This is an online platform that allows someone to get a preview of who you are, right, before they've even met you. So in some ways, this is your visual introduction. This is starting to be an introduction of your brand. So with that being said, you want to make sure that you are considering the best quality picture possible. And here are some, I would say, profile picture hacks that can really help you to determine how to do this, or if you don't have an appropriate photo, how to make one. So first, you want to make sure that your face takes up about 60% of your shot. And I know when I say 60%, some people are like, well, what does that really mean? What that means is that you really want to focus that it centers more around your shoulder area, and that majority of your face is part of that circle that you will see. And again, I will show you some visual representations in a minute, but you really want to make sure you are the center of that picture, okay? Also, you want to be the only one in the picture. That sometimes can be a little tricky because maybe we have a really great picture and we are standing with friends, or maybe we all had a nice professional shot and we are in our suits. But the leaning, the person's hand around you, sometimes it's really tricky to crop those pictures. So you want to avoid those. Consider appropriate attire for whatever industry you're looking to network in. So certainly taking a picture outside on a sunny day, but maybe you are in a more casual type environment is not maybe the vibe that you're looking to represent yourself on this platform. This kind of reminds me some of those pictures that are floating around where people show, here's my profile picture for Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, and they pick something else. Maybe it's TikTok, okay? Think about the context. Those pictures are very different between how you represent yourself and the intent of those platforms. So you want to keep in mind the same thing happens with this one. You want to make sure that if you choose to smile, because some people may not choose to smile, you want to make sure that you are smiling and representing yourself. And one hack I've always heard is smile through your eyes, right? You want to look excited all over. And I remember seeing this statistic when I was doing some research that actually people tend to consider profiles with individuals that have more of a smile, but that they look like their whole being is represented in a very positive light. They tend to look more favorably on those profiles than people that don't. Now, for some of our emergency management, homeland security folks, people who are really looking at some really, and not that not all areas are serious, but I understand in this industry, there are some areas that have, you know, you're not supposed to be like super bubbly and excited and looking like out of character. So you certainly don't want to look over the top smiling and excited on there, but you certainly want to represent yourself well. I do recommend that if there is a possibility for someone to take the picture for you, it's probably a lot better than trying to take a selfie shot, unless you have the camera set up and you can do a timer and be able to crop the picture that way. And last but not least, you want to make sure you're avoiding any distracting backgrounds. Having a plain wall behind you is probably the easiest thing you could do, or if it's a nice day outside, but having a more neutral background space is also great as well. And make sure, now that you've thought about the picture, and I'm going to show you again some examples in a second, you want to also think about that background picture. I know I'm guilty of it too. I'm pretty sure I have that standard plain background on LinkedIn. That's kind of the staple blue. But the background picture can actually add a nice visual element that can complement your overall picture. And it could also share a little bit more about what matters to you. And to be honest, the rule of thumb here, just think about helping it to complement your profile picture. So let me show you a few things when it comes to looking at profile picture examples. So here are some that I would say are not the best, and you probably can see very quickly why. So the first one up to the upper left-hand corner where the girl is smiling, she looks really happy, she has nice makeup on, but you can see like there's an arm around her and you can't really fully see her face, and the flash was really bright. So it kind of blotted out her face a little bit. So that really makes it hard for us to even see who she is. So that's probably not a great example of a picture. Now, keeping in line from the top, moving to the right, that gentleman's photo has a neutral background. He's not smiling, but he looks somewhat approachable, but the lighting seems a bit off and it's really squished. So like the dimensions of the pictures also don't look as complimentary. To the bottom left, the picture's way too far away, as you can tell. And it really, you have a hard time even seeing who this person is. And remember, LinkedIn, they want to get to know you. So don't have a picture that doesn't allow you to really be seen. And same thing goes with the bottom right. It looks like a great attempt. Looks like a somewhat nice background, but the lighting's way too bright. It darkened their picture and it's way too far away. So you want to have something that looks more like this. And here are some examples, and I even snuck in a few that had some background shots as well, because I thought that might be helpful. But as you can tell, each of these folks are more centered in their picture. That whole 60% idea of majority of your face taking up is truly in that shot. And it's fun. You get to see a little different personality. Like the person, Leah, on the bottom left, looks like she's a public speaker of some kind, almost looks like a little bit of a TED Talk. So you can kind of find out a little bit more about what they do. Or Mirna, who's at the very top right, looks like she does maybe meal planning, or she's a recruiter for this company, but it looks tasty. I can't say that, right? But it looks like really inviting and colorful. and exciting, but it also talks about perhaps what her purpose is there. And obviously she's a recruiter for that company, so she's really promoting it. The other two are just a little bit more simple, but again, it allows you an opportunity to see how to structure these. One thing I also want to note is the gentleman on the top, Jamie, has a black and white photo. And not that that's not inappropriate, but you want to be mindful of how these pictures sometimes, if you use a filter, how it might not represent you as well. And some filters may not look as great on certain platforms. So just keep that in mind. We don't want to be too fancy. It's a profile picture, supposed to be super professional, and hopefully this gives you a better representation of what to look for. Now, the next area we're going to move into is about the headline and the summary area, which I know folks definitely have questions about that. So you want to make sure that if you don't currently have this already, you want to add a headline and a summary that is going to complement it. After people look at the picture in the background, they move directly under that area and start to get an understanding of who you are as an individual. Now, there's a couple of tips that I've read online that will really help you. So I'm going to focus first on the headline and summary section kind of combined here, but then break those down individually. So the headline can definitely be more than your current role and why you do what you do, but it can explain some of that too. So just know that you can talk about your role, but you also want to make sure that you can expand that a little bit more. Again, this is a little bit about personal branding, which I know some students have shown interest in wanting more of a training on that. So we're looking to do that this summer. You don't necessarily need to list your job titles or your current job title. They can easily see that in your work description, but you can really just focus more on what you're passionate about, what you're committed to, and maybe even the value added that you give to an employer. And I'm going to give you some more information on how to do that in a second. Your summary is really almost like a short introduction of yourself, but less about what you're currently doing and avoiding more of listing out your skills or your job titles, and helping folks to understand kind of what your intention is. Think about this as a longer objective statement mixed with your elevator speech combined, right? This is helping folks to understand what is it you're hoping to gain, who are you, what are you passionate or committed about, and really helping to understand what it is you're hoping to get out of your connections on LinkedIn. I hope what you can take from it too, if you're not hearing that kind of trend, you want to be mindful that a lot of these are going to change over time. So my objective of what I would have written in a summary section in college is definitely completely different than what I would be doing now in my career. So this will be evolving over time. Also, a quick tip that I read online, you want to make sure you're avoiding overusing certain buzzwords. Some people really love to toss these into those summary sections, like a leadership or focus, strategic, experienced, passionate, expert. There's a couple on there. Not that they're necessarily incorrect in what you're doing with them, but sometimes they are so used over and over again that they tend to kind of not resonate well with folks, or sometimes they can seem a little bit like a generalization. So you want to be really careful with that. So let's talk about headlines a little bit more in some brainstorming questions. And I'm actually going to show you some headline examples as well to help you. So if you haven't really sat down to think about how to write a headline, here are some questions I think can help. What's the first thing you want to be known for? Now that seems like a legacy loaded question, but stay with me here. You know, maybe what might help you is your current education. Maybe it's a current job that you're in. Maybe it's a current area of expertise or policy, something that you're really interested in. But what do you want folks to really know about you? What are the key things that you bring to an employer? This is where I say your value added statement, right? What are the core skills or experiences that you've had that can really help make a case for an employer as to why they should consider reading the rest of your LinkedIn profile? And I wrote out some examples that I thought might be helpful to you. And again, we will be sharing these slides in the recording. So you're welcome to take a picture with your cell phone. I'm sure many of you are right now, but just know that this will be going out to you. But here's some examples that I thought of. Project coordinator who manages initiatives from ideation to implementation with a special interest in the public sector. University at Albany, insert student program name, student, an experience in data analysis, and seeking an internship in health policy. Very short, very succinct, but it also allows someone to say, oh, this is really interesting. They are a graduate student, they're an undergrad, they have some data analysis experience. Ooh, they're really interested in health policy. You know what? That sounds really interesting. Let me see more about their experiences and what resonates with our recruiting needs, right? The first one is an example of someone who is starting to create more of a niche for themselves and has started to talk about themselves from a project coordinator. So they've already had some experience, but now they're starting to say, like, here's some of the things that I do really well. I can start brainstorming, and I can also do really great to implement something, but I have a real focus on just this industry area, right? Then the person can start to read and say, okay, well, what kind of project coordination experience have they had? And really look at their profile. Again, these are just some very basic examples for a headline. Now, also, some people for headlines use more key names. So you might see in mine, and I don't have mine as an example on here, but you're welcome to look at it because I'm still updating and changing mine because I've started to. With LinkedIn, I started to even use ones with like key skills that I contribute. So whether it's a facilitator or a career coach or a motivational coach or things like that. So I've also used some of those areas to help people understand what are the niche areas that I'm most passionate about and looking to continue to build my career on. So here's some examples of headlines that I thought would be helpful. Hopefully these aren't too blurry on the screen, although the example for Simon Gray might be a little bit blurry, but it just helps you to see how you can leverage it. So let's just take Sarah Doherty Johnson's, right? Hers is very clear. I help high performers land amazing jobs. Wow, like that's just super simple, right? Not overthinking it, very clear about what she does. Then she goes into a little bit more specific. She's an interview coach. She's also an executive resume writer, plus she does LinkedIn branding. In general, she's a career coach. So it really helps people to understand the multifaceted layers of their experience, their skill set, but also what Sarah contributes and maybe why someone would want to connect with her, right? It gives you a really quick overview of who they are and what they're focusing on. If you move to the gentleman to the right, Dave Burns, turning complex ideas into simple concepts the public understands, corporate communication specialist. Like that really complements that title a lot, but it also allows them to really get a sense of they have that unique skill and not everybody can do that. So again, it's something that can really intrigue and get the reader wanting to know a little bit more. And I don't expect all of you to have all of this done over the weekend. This is going to take some intentional thought. So however, Joan, myself, or any other experiential learning or career coordinator can help you in evaluating your statement, we'd be more than happy to. Now let's talk about those summaries as well. So the summary and some effective points I want to share with you about the summary is that, again, this is basically combining like your elevator speech, but also almost like a value-added statement mixed with an objective. So this sounds like a lot. If you've ever worked with us before, we're always talking about value added in all your materials. The objective statement's supposed to be very clean and concise, but there's some key things here that allow you to add more than what you're traditionally used to. So some suggestions we have are contain your background information. Maybe you want to give some examples of your qualifications and the goals of objectives of what you're looking to do in your networking at this point in time, right? Or in your career. You want to keep your summary roughly around 600 characters or so, maybe a solid paragraph, but it's enough to help make sure that we are keeping it so that the reader isn't getting overwhelmed, but just getting enough information that will intrigue them to read the rest of your profile. Unlike other times where we tell you not to use personal pronouns because that is taboo language on a resume, but also in an objective statement, this tends to allow you to use all the I's and me's you want, but also we can work with you to clean it up if it's too repetitive, so don't worry about that, but you can use them. You should contain value statements, so what strengths do you have and how does it relate to your reader's interests? So think about that whole attraction process, right? If you put out there kind of your skill set and what you've done so far for those prospective employers that you've been interested in, you can start to highlight those in your summary. And to add to that, really think of the relevant skills from the industry you're looking into moving into or to learn more about. Sometimes you may not know those off the bat, and I don't blame you, especially if you're an undergrad and you're still very early on in your career. This is where studying position descriptions and reading key buzzwords on your field are really going to help you to leverage this. You also want to show your personality and passion and commitment. And you also want to make sure that you reference your career interests and maybe next steps, because you're going to see some examples of how some of the summaries in the next slide kind of allow the person to understand, again, what's your intention with your LinkedIn profile. So here's a quick summary. 2 examples. First one, I'm a detail-oriented and self-directed professional with a passion for public policy. I'm seeking a career as an intelligence analyst that would utilize my skills in clear and concise writing, data analysis, and research. Real simple, gives the person a solid introduction of themselves, but also allows, again, a very clear intention of what their goal and objective is. The second one's a little bit longer. I'm an energetic and goal-driven professional who's actively seeking a career in international affairs, specifically working on migration issues. My experience in volunteering with a local nonprofit who serves refugees has equipped me with the necessary critical thinking, problem solving, and communication skills needed to serve this population. So again, you're really taking an opportunity to really highlight some not only the industry, but also maybe a niche of the industry you're feeling really comfortable in. It's starting to showcase that, hey, I do have some work working in this field, and here are the skills that I've gained from it and can contribute to whatever employer opportunities presented. You're not necessarily coming at this without that. Again, these are just some examples. They're very clear, they're very concise, but we'd be happy to work with you on that to make sure that as you're preparing a summary, it's also emulating that same feeling for a prospective employer. So I've said a lot. I didn't know if, Joan, if there was any questions you wanted to highlight.
So no questions yet.
Okay, great. Okay. So hopefully I didn't lose anybody. And I want to reiterate again, you can do this. We're going to move on to the work experience section with some tips for you as well. Okay. So the work experience section, there's a couple of things that you want to keep in mind. So here you want to make sure that as you are listing the employers, because basically when you start to add your work experience, it already prompts you with the fields that you have to complete. And what I love about it is if your employer has a LinkedIn company profile, you can actually link the two together, which is highly recommended as a strategy on LinkedIn, because then an employer could click on the company profile and get to see more about the employer if they're not familiar with them. So that's a plus. And let's say, I don't know, and a recruiter is looking at a company and said, I've really gotten some great recruits from them. Who works for them? They could also use that as reverse information because they are looking at that company's profile, for example. You want to start with an overview of 2 to 3 sentences is one recommendation that I saw that helps to understand what exactly was your role within that organization. Now you want to make sure, now this is one suggestion that we've given many of you when we've trained you or reviewed your materials. You really want to make sure that you are avoiding using action verbs like responsible for or duties included in this part, because that is not that does not really help the employer to understand what it is that you are relaying as a value added in your experience. You really want to avoid those, and you want to make sure you highlight key words in your positions section in your work experience. And in that, if you want some help with that, I recommend looking over your job description to help you with this, because sometimes you may not sure what are the key words that you should be highlighting from there. Now, one quick question that I've gotten in the past was paragraph or bullets? And I've seen either or, and I'll actually have an example after the next slide that will show you the difference between them. I've heard different opinions. Bullets tend to be faster and cleaner because they're faster to read. But again, you want to get out of the habit of repeating your position description and making it into the bullet section. If you choose to do a paragraph, then you can be a little bit more storytelling, but you also want to be clear and concise on that. So I can see where it can get pretty tricky. So you want to make sure that this section you're being concise, but you're also highlighting your accomplishments, which we're going to get to in the next slide. Okay, so you want, like I said, clear and concise, but you want to make sure that you are listing out some accomplishments. And I've actually seen this on a couple profiles, whether it's written in the actual paragraph or people will include it in the bullet. But you want to make sure you list out a reasonable amount of accomplishments, and front load them. So here's a strategy that I've seen work quite well. So instead of writing promoted to current position where I excelled in volunteer coordination, increasing the amount of volunteer engagement by 25%. And to be honest, that sounds very long. It sounds like it could be written so much more clean and concise. You can convert that to say, increase volunteer engagement by 25% in the first year of my promotion. So much easier. You're putting the highlight and the impact in the front, and it allows you to just be more clean and concise in your writing. So if you need some help with that, again, we can help you with that, but making sure that you're highlighting your accomplishments and the value you've contributed to an employer is important. Now, I don't want to neglect that there are some undergrads on this call. For some of our grad students, you may find that this comes a lot easier to you because you've had time to do various work experiences. But for some of our students who are about to graduate and go on the market, or those who are a little bit younger, you may say, how can a lifeguarding job or a barista job or working in a bookstore, for example, or even being a nanny, what is the value added that I can contribute here? And there certainly are examples to help you, and please make sure to talk with Joan and I because we've worked with a lot of students to help in that area. The other piece with work experiences, you can ask for recommendations for your work, and individuals can actually write to you on that, which is great, and they can speak to that. And I've recently started to see former staff of mine who've reached out and asked for this, so I'm really interested to see how this will help boost their profile on other people's searches here. And last but not least, this is a great tip, add supporting information. You don't want to just tell people, you want to actually show them. And that's really important because that's going to get you in the habit of when you're interviewing and when you're writing those cover letters to not just say I did these things, but I actually can show you, meaning that I have supporting documentation or even something that I can quantify to show my impact. So feel free with LinkedIn, upload images, upload presentations you facilitated, upload PDF documents, help employers understand the work that you've done in your industry, and show off your knowledge a little bit here. This is a great way to show, again, your value added. So I'm going to show you in the next slide just some examples. And again, one of them might be smaller than the other. The one to the left is actually a former colleague of mine who worked at the university, and they did their written statement more in a paragraph form. So when you have some time to read this on your own, you're going to be able to see this in much more depth. But they really focused on using clear and concise statements, but also really good action verbs to understand the impact and the focus of their work in the position. The one that's more closer to the front, the legislative director position, is from another student of mine, a former student who graduated, and they were sharing a little bit more about more bullet format, but again, very clean and concise bullets that really capture very quickly what is the value added that they've done. And they avoided any mention of responsibilities included, duties as assigned, type of language. Okay, so that is just some examples that I would give you on this one to really help you understand just how to leverage these. And what I do appreciate though about LinkedIn, a lot of the prior fields like the name of the employer, your title, the time frame of your employment, all of that is already included on here. So that really does help you in that sense. Okay, so I'm gonna check with the chat box to see if, and I see there's a couple of questions coming in here as well. So let me see what I got. So if I'm interested in a few different industries, how do I create a summary headline that isn't overly specific and therefore alienates certain industries of interest? And you can certainly do that. So I thought that was a great question that I could have looked at a little bit earlier, but I'm happy to answer that here too. So if you're interested in various industries, and you want to capture that, I think what could really help is, instead of maybe focusing your headline on that area as much, maybe you could actually utilize your summary to create that interest for the employer a little bit more. So I think that's something that you can use, and I'm happy to look at that a little bit more, because the headline is really meant to capture like a quick snapshot of things that are important to you and that you want employers to know. Maybe it's less about your title, but you heard like a quick summary, a quick objective statements on there. You might want to include that in your summary statement. Another question I had is, what if we don't have work experience, as if we were just a freshman? I imagine that's what you meant. How do we write something interesting then? So maybe you don't have any relevant current work experience now, but maybe you've been doing volunteering, or maybe you've been involved in a club or organization, and you can utilize that to complete your work experience and start adding some content here. I never want a student to feel, especially if you're very early on in your search process, to think that some of those clubs and organizations or volunteer opportunities do not add value. They certainly do, and employers can see a lot of really great skills that are developed very early on in those. So just something to keep in mind that can help you, and perhaps some of the additional documentation could be flyers that you've created for that. Maybe there's pictures of some of your engagement there. Remember, LinkedIn is more than just how a normal platform is utilized. This is a professional networking tool that allows you to really help someone better understand the value you've contributed. So I think volunteering and clubs and organizations are a great way for you to add there. Some other questions, should work experience be written like a resume format? Oh, that's a good one, and I believe I covered that. So if, again, to give you examples visually, you can write it in a bullet format. You can also write a paragraph. I've seen both done, but I think you want to see how clean and concise the writing is in both of those. And even the written one also highlights more with utilizing action verbs for that one. So that's just something to keep in mind, is that it's very clean and concise and has a lot of clean and strong action verbs for that. And last but not least, how far back should we go for our work experience? That's a great question. Honestly, it's very subjective to the individual. Like any career, anything older than 10 years can really become, skills get outdated, industries get outdated very quickly. So you just want to be mindful that anything older than 10 years is not as relevant. You know, even keeping up the most relevant 5 years of experience is great, maybe 5 to 7 years. And if you're not sure, make sure that you keep your profile private, work with a colleague to get it critiqued before you go live, just to make sure that the right messaging is coming across. These are all really great questions, everyone. I'm going to continue to move forward. I'll check the chat box again to make sure that I'm getting as much relevant questions answered. So the next section that we're moving into is adding a skills section. And this one is not super fancy because it is one of the quickest wins that you're going to get in your LinkedIn. So first, you can scroll through an entire list and they already have all of these skills already preset. So you can actually identify them and select them pretty quickly to add those to your profile. But here's the catch. You want to make sure that the skills you're highlighting are most relevant to you in the season that you're in. That's like kind of my mantra right now, okay? You want to make sure that anything that you're picking is relevant to what you've done. We never want to over embellish your skills or pick ones that are not as accurate, or maybe that we don't really want to move our career in that direction, so we choose to not highlight those. Be sure whatever you are picking here also complements what you've claimed in your headline and summary, that your profile should all come together very nicely, like a nice menu about who you are, okay? It is important though to make sure that you are updating these often and reviewing them. Because again, your intention on LinkedIn may shift over time, and it will change over time, which means you certainly don't want anything outdated. Seek and provide endorsements. Now, this is a common question that I get from students, because endorsements is basically someone taking some time, and perhaps I'll give myself as an example. I ask someone to write an endorsement about my facilitation or my training background, right? Some people say there's value added to that and others don't. You can choose to do this, so I don't want to say it's not a good use of your time, But I find that some folks don't actually spend as much time doing this, so I really leave it up to the student to decide if they find that this is worth doing it. But basically, the intention of this feature in your profile is to help other people understand what skills you've done and to give credibility to those skills, right? So it's almost like, again, a recommendation, or an endorsement of those. You can certainly go through your network and your contacts to find people who can help you. So maybe it was a colleague, a direct supervisor who could quickly write a note that can allow them to validate that skill. But I also encourage you that as you get further in your career, if you're asking folks to do this for you, please ensure that you're returning the favor. People want to make sure they're utilizing the most out of this platform. And also, you can manage to either show some endorsements or hide them depending on what's relevant to you at that point in time as you're searching. So just keep that in mind. Sharing some relevant content and comment. So here's where we start becoming a little bit more active. So now that you've spent time not only creating your profile, it's now time to really utilize this platform for what it is, a networking tool. So you need to be active. So some ways you can do that to add more content to your profile is to start to share what others are posting, reshare, relevant articles, and maybe an employer that you're following or an alum that you're connecting with or a colleague shared something that you thought resonated with you, and you're going to repost that, very similar to other platforms. And you don't want to overthink this too much. Maybe you share a blog post because you were reading a certain blog that you find really interesting, or maybe you highlight a certain podcast show that you found interesting, maybe a web article or a news story of some kind. What's important is that whatever you choose to share as part of your profile and to show your engagement on the platform, that it really aligns with your point of view and the whole point of your profile, right? And your objective, but also your commitment and knowledge to that industry. That's what I really love about LinkedIn, is that it allows you to really dive into the topics and professional areas that you really love and to share a little bit more about your opinion, your thoughts, and to really add that type of value in a way that maybe a resume and cover letter doesn't necessarily highlight. Also, you want to make sure that at the same time that you might be sharing relevant content for other users to see, you may also want to comment on what you share. And also, it starts to help you to establish yourself in your thought leadership, if you will, on a certain topic. And if you didn't know, with the algorithms with LinkedIn, the more you comment and engage, the higher your profile can eventually become as other folks are recruiting, which is a nice fun fact there too. So I see that there's a comment in the chat, so I'll take a quick peek. What is the norm on LinkedIn when adding people? Can you just send them a request or should you ask them in person? Does it depend on how much you have interacted with them in person? Gianna, that is a great question. I'm actually going to talk about that in the next slide. So you're leading me right to the next one. Just one quick tip here too. The reason why I put up as a picture on here was just saying that you want to make sure that you are keeping your relevant information up to date, right? You want to make sure that whatever you're doing here and you're sharing is really helping you to establish that. So the next slide, we're going to talk about following relevant influencers in your industry. So this is where we're starting to talk about engagement even further, right? You want to make sure that as you're looking at your newsfeed, like any other platform, that you are taking the time to cultivate and connect with people that as you open it up, it brings relevant content and information about your industry or your career interests and passions. So it definitely helps you to stay relevant and real in your field. And it also gives you some context to your profile, which I really like about this platform too. So if you're not sure how to follow people or where to identify folks, I just wanted to give you some quick examples because I'm actually going to answer Gianna's question that complements the slide. So try not to overthink this, right? Ask alumni to connect with you. Maybe you want to connect with faculty that you've gotten to know while your time here at the university. Maybe it's career staff. Maybe it's professional association contacts. For some younger students, you may not know what I'm referring to, but in each industry, in each field, there are these bodies that come together that share best practices in the field. They're called professional associations. They are a great way to network, great way to identify different career opportunities, including internships and jobs. Those also may have contacts already on this platform. You may find that there are presenters. So you're sitting in on trainings, you're sitting on one right now. Maybe you want to connect with me on LinkedIn. You can send me a request, right? And we can work together. Also, you might identify context through blog posts or web articles that you're reading and you find their profile on LinkedIn and you want to engage with them further. There's so much resources available to you on identifying people in your field, and sometimes it can feel a little bit overwhelming and intimidating to make those asks. So here's some suggestions I have for you on how to connect with folks. To answer Gianna's question, you definitely want to make sure that you're sending a note when you request a new connection on LinkedIn. And they do give you kind of that standard language in the LinkedIn box, the invitation box. I discourage using that because everybody uses that. That doesn't make anybody stand out any differently. So I would send a quick note, and there is a character limit that you want to be aware about that allows you to quickly introduce yourself, but also to inform the new person what it is you're hoping to gain out of it. And I have a few questions to help guide you. So while you're thinking of sending this contact, an invitation, perhaps you want to really think about, why is it you want to connect with this person? Is it that they have a title of a job that really interested you? Or is it that they are working for a company or organization that you are really interested in exploring opportunities in for the future? Maybe they were recommended to you by another network contact, whether it was a peer or a faculty member, a career staff member, or experiential learning coordinator. All of those are appropriate, and it's okay to insert that. It's appropriate to name drop, because then in some ways it also helps incentivize that request, right? It's also important to let the person know, what do you hope to gain or learn through the connection? Maybe your objective is you want to schedule a time to chat with them because you're really interested to hear more about their career, or maybe you are looking to get some guidance um, on maybe a potential internship that the company has, and you want to gain some insight information, so on and so forth. Everybody's a little different here. But you want to make sure that in that statement, it only allows you about maybe 2 or 3 lines. So it's not very long of a request, but don't be afraid to utilize that. I think more people are honestly going to be more receptive when they get a more personalized invitation. Be consistent with your engagement too. You know, you should be checking your newsfeed and commenting and engaging with folks as well. You don't want to have a profile that gets outdated, but you also don't want to not follow up with people as they're engaging with you, because again, think of the algorithms of the LinkedIn profile platform. The more engaged, the more you're sharing, the likelihood that if your profile, you checked off the box saying to make sure that you look active, you're actively searching for a job, as recruiters are looking for potential profiles, you will come up on those searches. So it's a great way to show more about your investment and knowledge in the field that you're interested in, or fields, to one of our students' points. Some other ideas I gave you here too is to not really think of limiting yourself as well. I already mentioned professional associations, but also think of how to identify other connections, right? Maybe your school has an alumni group. Maybe your Greek life has an alumni group. Maybe there's a certain industry or title and they have a professional association, so you want to connect with them. And also remember, the best part about LinkedIn is these connections can be made with people who are local to you and people who are across the world. And so that also makes it great for you to start establishing a connection with people, especially now while we're all in remote work, being able to connect with people. And I also wanted to mention about companies' pages and making sure that I note that as well. Companies do utilize LinkedIn a lot, and one thing I would start to do is to connect and follow those companies, and also see what's trending and what's posting to them, and show your engagement on their pages. You know, I also know that in our field, sometimes we need to be kind of careful about what we're posting, and especially if something could truly be a hot topic. But I know you're all very smart professionals that would never be combative in any way with an employer, because you're all looking to make those valuable connections. But knowing to connect on a company's page and showing your investment there is a really great strategy to increase your networking, whether you're sharing one of their posts, or you're commenting on something. You want to make sure that you're actively engaged. I know we're nearing the end of our time, but I know that there's probably more questions coming. Just some really quick things I want to make sure that you know about any remaining recommendations I have. Bigger picture, you want to make sure that you keep your profile private until you are 100% ready to make it live. One, it gives you the time that you need to put the extra work in looking over your content, looking for grammar, making sure everything's connected. And once it's live, it doesn't mean you can't go back and edit it or you can't shut it off. But for right now, if you're very new at this, you never want to represent yourself with a half-done profile. It is a live document, so you want to make sure that you're updating this and visiting this often. And everybody's a little subjective on when they're updating this, but if I was a student, I would recommend at least at the end of each term, because more than likely you probably finished some type of relevant coursework, maybe you finished a relevant internship, maybe you're graduating, so you have some new milestones and achievements to talk about. Again, you want to make sure that you're keeping your requests and connections intentional to your career goals. Unlike other platforms where some people have 17, 1,800 connections, the goal of LinkedIn is not to do that. And that isn't looked at very favorably. The real strategy here is to connect with people that are actually of interest to you and your goals and objectives. So if you need to take some time and clean out all those connections that are no longer of value to you, please feel free to do so. It's important to make sure that you're making this platform work for you. Proofreading, that shouldn't be a no-brainer. I imagine most people would know that. And make sure that your career development, keep this in mind, is only as active as you are. And that's just making this a habit. Adding this as part of your consistency in your career development is putting in the time and the work that you need to in this platform. So I did list some resources on here that I utilized for today's presentation, but I also wanted to make sure to have you ask any questions and resources as well. And that way I could help answer any additional questions that you all have. So let me see what I have here. Should we be accepting all invitations, even from individuals who are not in your industry, but just individuals you know? I think it honestly, so Sophia, that's a great question. I would caution on that because unlike other platforms where we can connect with different friends and family that might be in different industries than us, you want to try your best to keep your LinkedIn profile really focused on your objectives. Now, you might connect with former staff, with friends, and that's okay too, but try to think of majority of your contacts should be people that you are most interested in connecting with, for sure. Other questions that folks have? I'm going to give some time here to see what other questions we have. Now, one quick piece, because I'm not done, I want to make sure we're leveraging the amount of time we have left together. I do want to take a quick second and thank all the students who've been participating in our virtual series. Again, I'm not done, but I did want to make sure in case people do have to go, just to mention that we are in the process of identifying a summer 2020 series as well virtually for students. So I'm going to be posting the student evaluation and feedback form in the chat box, but I'm also going to send it to you in an email and would appreciate any feedback that you all have as well, whether you're giving us topics or ideas of career development or resources that you're looking for. Any of those are going to be helpful because we want to make these sessions as useful as possible, especially going into the summer months. And certainly, of course, on behalf of the Career Office, we want to make sure that you are having the best of luck as you are finishing out the rest of this term, and that all of you and your family are staying safe and healthy as well. So I'm going to put our contact information up here in case some folks are hopping off, but I did want to see, and I'm going to stop sharing my screen for a second just to see where we're at. Okay, so one question I got, would be okay to send the former staff or alumni after connecting your resume, or would that be assumed to be too forward? It depends. I mean, former staff or alumni, it would, especially for former staff that you've worked with or people that you've connected with, I imagine most folks would be open to looking over your document. I'm not sure if you're indicating that to say that you're currently searching and that you wanted to see if there's any opportunities that you wanted to share your resume in case they wanted to forward it along to other contacts. I think that's okay too. Just keep in mind too, I've had various contacts in my career and staff that I've worked with, and if they haven't stayed up to date with me, it would seem a little out of the blue for them to email me and just send me their resume. I would probably make sure to keep those kind of connections fresh, whether we're checking in maybe once a month, if not once a month, maybe within a couple of months, maybe even once a year, but keeping that consistent engagement, whether it's through digital connection and then also over a phone call or a Zoom meeting, is really helpful. So I'm just kind of mindful of perception for that. But absolutely, if you had a great rapport with that staff member and you want to let them know, I'm currently searching and I wanted to share my resume with all of you, I'm happy to have you do that. I think that's totally fine. The next question that I see here, I'm just taking a quick look. Under the accomplishments section, when should we get rid of all the courses we listed? Maybe a year after graduating. And I'm going to give you guys the feedback form as well because I was able to get that for you. Let's see, everyone. So for coursework, actually, I probably maybe after a year, I wouldn't say so. I mean, the content isn't necessarily outdated after a year. I would say maybe after a couple of years, like maybe after 5 years, content can certainly change. I know that in the master's program you're in, Sophia, is a professional program. So adjustments are done every year to keep the content up to date. So I would say within 5 years, I would probably consider taking that off because even a year afterward, I doubt the curriculum would have changed dramatically, but you would have to take that off. So that is a really good question. Seems like we've slowed down a little bit, so that's totally fine. Again, I just want to be able to let you know, again, my name is Yalitza Negron, Director of Career Services for Rockefeller. Happy to continue working with all of you, or perhaps if you're an undergraduate and you reach out to Joan, Joan works more with our undergrads, I work with our graduate students. More than happy to chat with you. If you are a student at the university and you've worked with neither one of us, we are more than happy to help connect you with available career staff, whether it's the Uptown campus or your respective other staff who do similar work to us. We just want to make sure that you are getting all the resources you need available for this type of great platform. I hope this left you with some really good information about LinkedIn. I know it seems like a lot of work. Honestly, y'all, just take it one piece at a time. Happy to critique and work individually on your profile, but make sure once you have that up, use it actively, make it a part of your news feed. You'll be surprised with valuable connections you can get out of this platform. All right, everyone, I wish you all a wonderful end of your spring semester. As best you can, hope you and your family are all staying safe and healthy during this time, and know the university's got your back. So continue to wish you all the best. Thank you, everybody.